Welcome to the TYBA Political Science 6th semester course, Western Political Thinkers, Rousseau to Marx. Today I am going to deal with unit number 3, that is John Stuart Mill. And the module name under this unit is John Stuart Mill's Contribution to Individualism. John Stuart Mill has revised the understanding, of utilitarianism that was propounded by Jeremy Bentham. So, under this module, I am going to talk about some important aspect of Mill's concept of individualism or utilitarian individualism. What does he feel being individual? So, the first thing that I am going to talk about, assertive individuality. Then, utility of the experience, individual choice. Fourth one is autonomous planning of the individual faculties, individual autonomy in living life, individual character, individual capability, and individual genius. These are the main aspects that I have chosen from John Stuart Mill's book titled as On Liberty. Mill has defined and contemplated and defined the idea of being individual or individuality in his book On Liberty. So from this module, the students will be able to experience the formative stages in the formation of individuality. Students will be able to recognize the importance of the individuality in human life. Now, here J.S. Mill somewhere offers us a kind of a humane individuality. An individuality that is, that is quite sensitive about the people, the things, the surrounding near to us, around us. So, this is quite fascinating understanding of individuality that J.S. Mill has offered to us. So, first is assertive individuality. What does Mill think about it? John Stuart Mill writes in his book On Liberty that as it is useful that while mankind are imperfect, there should be different opinions. So is it that there should be different experiments of living. That free scope should be given to varieties of character, short of injury to others, and that the worth of different modes of life should be proved practically when anyone thinks fit to try them. And that's why it is desirable, in short, that in things which do not primarily concern others, individuality should assert itself. So here, in this quote, in this para, Mill is trying to tell us the origin of individuality. Where does individuality should assert or start, or from where should it spring up from? So he says it is desirable that in things which do not primarily concern others, individuality should assert itself. Then utility of the experience. He further says, but it is the privilege and proper condition of a human being arrived at the maturity of his faculties to use and interpret experience in his own way. It is for him to find out what part of recorded experience is properly applicable to his own circumstances and character. So Mill is saying, J.S. Mill is suggesting that the person should be able to utilize the experience in a more humane manner. It is the privilege, and proper condition of a human being that would utilize the recorded experience to his own circumstances. Such person who knows how to utilize the experience in a more humane manner would be able to define its or her individuality in a distinct manner. And that's why that experience, utility of the experience is very important for the development of individuality. Then third one is individual choice. He continues saying that the human faculties of perception, judgment, discriminative feeling, mental activity, and even moral preference are exercised only in making a choice. All these human faculties of perception, understanding, particular judgment, discriminative feeling come to us when person makes choice, whether in his favor or on others' favor. So this choice, is very important. And how to make an individual choice? Then that's a choice where an individual should be able to make his decision, make his perception clear, should come to a kind of a productive, beneficial judgment, not only to him but to others, so that the personal choice will not hurt others. Okay, so the individual choice, how a person makes an individual choice, is a matter of J.S. Mill's utilitarianism. Then autonomous planning of the individual faculties. How can one plan or manage his own faculties, like intellectual, moral, psychological, human faculties? That's why J.S. Mill says, he who lets the world or his own portion of it choose his plan of life for him has no need of any other faculty than the ape-like one of imitation. He who chooses his plan for himself employs all his faculties. He says that if someone else is doing or choosing your fate, someone else is deciding that what you should do, then that person shouldn't need any faculties, because that person is only imitating others. So if someone is imitating others, there is no use of faculties. Okay, so such person who imitates others, in fact, loses upon his own faculties, all individual faculties. Then who does utilize his own faculties? A person who chooses his own plan, to do planning, a particular planning. A person has to employ, has to organize all his faculties in a particular manner. So that's why autonomous planning of the individual faculties is a important feature of J.S. Mill's understanding of individualism. Then individual autonomy in living life. He says, J.S. Mill says, human nature is not a machine to be built after a model and set to do exactly the work prescribed for it. But human nature is like a tree which requires to grow and develop itself on all sides according to the tendency of the inward forces which make it a living thing. It's not a machine which is built by someone else. Machine, a particular machine represents the faculties of other man, a producer, a builder, an engineer, But when it comes to human body, human nature is quite different. It is quite autonomous of other things. So the way tree grows, it utilizes its internal faculties, internal tendencies in its favor. Same way man should do, a person should do. That's what J.S. Mill is suggesting over here. Now, individual character. A person whose desires and impulses are his own, are the expression of his own nature, as it has been developed and modified by his own culture, is said to have a character. Means a person whose desires and impulses are his own, like That person has control over his desires and impulses. A person who is able to decide what should be his desire or her desire, how should one behave, that person is able to, if that person is able to decide that, then the expression that person gives is own expression, because it has been developed and modified, it has been curated by that person, by his own culture, individual culture, which is only distinct to him, and that character is an individual character, and that character is the real character, and that should be cultivated by that person, and that is the individual character according to J.S. Mill. Now let's talk about individual capability. J.S. Mill says, thus the mind itself is bound to the yoke. Even in what people do for pleasure, conformity is the first thing thought of. They like in crowds. They exercise choice only among things commonly done. Peculiarity of taste, eccentricity of conduct are shunned equally with crimes, until by dint of not following their own nature. They have no nature to follow. Their human capacities are withered and starved. They become incapable of any strong wishes or native pleasures, and are generally without either opinions or feelings of home growth, or properly their own growth. So those people who are prone to conformity, those people who refuse to engage critically, those people who loves populism, they lack, they fail to have their own opinions, and such people lose upon capability. A person who is driven by populism, conformity, or is complacent to the yoke, are not to have any kind of capability or their own capability, and they gives up. By doing this, they gives up on their own growth. The last thing that I am going to talk about, individual genius. J.S. Mill writes, I insist thus emphatically on the importance of genius and the necessity of allowing it to unfold itself freely, both in thought and in practice, being well aware that no one will deny the position in theory, but knowing also that almost everyone in reality is totally indifferent to it. So individual genius, importance of individual genius is only possible to realize when someone is allowing that individual nature, that his own nature, to unfold freely, both in thought and practice. A person who thinks freely without any bias or without any pre-decided intent is able to reflect or is able to demonstrate his individual genius. So the individual genius is that comes out or becomes visible only when someone lets himself freely engage in thought and practice, in any activity, freely, without any suspicion. Such person grows his individual genius. So these are some features about J.S. Mill's individualism, which are very important in understanding J.S. Mill's contribution to individualism. This individualism is also very important in terms of understanding government, understanding democracy, understanding human rights, understanding gender. So this individualism is which is universal, and there should be a society. So J.S. Mill's utilitarianism tries to cultivate or come up with a kind of a society which will give a kind of a space to develop such kind of individualism. For references, thank you.